I am a 35 years old female just got engaged to my fiancé 37 male Sam. We do not live together because we're waiting till marriage given he and his family are highly conservative Christians but they're really nice and lovable people. I had plans to spend NYE with Sam, but he said he was out for NYE dinner celebration with his parents then called me again inviting me to join them, and I happily did. His parents were there, they welcomed me and ordered many dishes and desserts and drinks. We celebrated and had great time, that is until it was time to pay. I pulled my wallet out of my bag letting them know that we'll split the check between us. Sam mumbled, "No, you don't have to, we invited you," but I insisted. He and his parents then stared at me. I asked what was wrong and both mother-in-law and father-in-law said they didn't have money on them. I was shocked. I turned to Sam and he said he too forgot his wallet at home and didn't bring enough money to cover even on round of drinks. His dad then laughed nervously, "Right, so guess we should let the doctor pay." I was taken aback. I said, "I'm sorry, but no, this is just so much money to spend on one dinner by myself, and I didn't think I was expected to pay the entire bill." Sam said I should pay and he'd pay me back later, but I said no since I know he will have to get a job to pay that much money. I said, "I'm sorry, but this isn't the first time I've been put in this situation by him and family, where I'm expected to rescue them after they somehow forgot their wallets and expect bothers to pay hundreds for their extravagant dinner." I told them I'll only pay for what I had and that's it. He and his parents were shocked. They started arguing about how I have the potential to pay right there and then, but I was acting as if they were strangers, not family. But that doesn't mean I'm obligated to pay. How could someone go out to a fancy restaurant, order so many dishes, desserts and drinks without bringing money? Sam begged that I just do it and call it a night, but I refused. The argument got heated, then I got up and walked out. Sam called later at 2 a.m. basically yelling that I ruined NYE celebration and made his parents suffer, because I refused to pay the entire bill. AMD instead acted selfishly and paid only for myself, after they were gracious enough to invite me. I told him how unfair it was for me to pay. Even if I have a good salary doesn't mean I want to spend it all on fancy dinner. He didn't reply, he just said he'll pray that my parents will let this go, and not resent me after I basically damaged the relationship with them. I felt awful thinking I should have covered the bill instead of leaving. I am a 28-year-old woman, and have been married to my husband, a 32-year-old man, since 2018. My husband is ethnically Japanese, and a second-generation American. His parents are from Osaka. He kind of sort of half speaks Japanese, mostly sentences he has memorized / greetings. And his parents speak great English. On the other hand, I lived in Japan for 3 years, so I am conversationally pretty good. I have studied hard to get to the level I'm at, and I have passed level 2 of the Japanese language proficiency test. Not great, but not bad. Lately, my husband is super into me calling him Goshijin-sama, which can be translated to my honored husband. It's extremely unusual to call your own husband this, as it is usually reserved for other people's husbands as a respectful term. But it's kind of an anime / Japanese geek culture thing. I was okay with it in private because it makes him happy. Last week went to his parents' house for dinner, and on the way over he asked if I could call him Goshijin-sama all evening. I immediately shot his idea down with a firm no, because that would be super embarrassing. His parents are native Japanese speakers in their 60s. I'm not going to subject them to what you'd pay a waitress in a maid cafe $20 for a cup of coffee to call you. To be honest, I don't think my husband really gets how the phrase is properly used, despite his insistence. He kept trying to convince me, reminding me that he is Japanese and knows what is proper. Despite the fact that I speak better Japanese than him, but I was having none of it. I just shut down and tuned him out. We got there, and sometime into the night I called his name to ask if he wanted a drink. Despite him being in hearing range, he ignored me. I said it again, and this time he looked at me, gave me this pleading shrug, and then turned back to the TV. I didn't get him a drink and just got myself one. A while later, I said his name again, and he audibly sighed. He told me that he wanted me to call him what I call him at home. To which I responded I would most certainly not be calling him what I call him at home. This was all in front of his parents, by the way. On the car drive home, I told him that I wasn't going to call him Goshijin-sama anymore because he can't draw the line between fun, playful couple stuff and his parents. He has sulked for the past week and I don't even know what to do. Normally I would not even consider the possibility that I was wrong here, but he's normally a very rational, reasonable, and respectful person. I feel like I'm being gaslighted and don't know what to do. I have been with my partner for 7 years. We initially met online, and after meeting in person a few times, and realizing our affection for one another, we found it promising to move in together. I moved from California to Pennsylvania to be with him throughout graduate school. All was seemingly well during this time. I have never really had any reason to not trust him. I encouraged him to very much so, to try his best to make friends, or to explore hobbies on his own outside of the various ones we share, because I have my own passions. And I found we connected most when we met in the middle through conversations about these passions, through the act of explaining or showcasing what we've taken in or learned. Throughout these 7 years, he has struggled with very low self-esteem, and though I don't necessarily think of myself as the pillar of self-love, the depth of mine doesn't reach the low perception of his self-value. Because of this, he has seen and stopped seeing both a counselor and a therapist, and has been on medication to help for the last 6 months. Things were seemingly well between us, and continued to be pretty fluid. We continued to share things, and take long walks, and were pretty open-ended about where we stood in the relationship. If one was feeling a bit of an ebb, the other would pick up more of a share, and vice versa. However, things took a bit of a dip about 2 days ago when I felt the ebb and asked him about it. Initially, he said there was really nothing wrong. And perhaps I was just feeling this way because with our schedules we haven't been able to see one another for long periods of time like we are used to, which is true. But the feeling continued to irk me, and when I asked about it a second time, he confessed to me. He had begun talking to another girl from another country via Instagram direct messages. And though things between she and him never crossed the boundaries of platonic friendship, he really loved the initial rush of someone asking him questions about his favorite movie, his favorite album, his favorite book. All things he and I already know very well about one another. I asked if he'd sent any selfies, or anything risque, and he said no, though I can't confirm, because he deleted the messages. A good deal of me believes him, because of how open he was about the initial conversations to begin with. We slept apart, and I just felt really confused the entire night, because I couldn't really resonate with wanting that sort of attention from someone else. If anything, his yearning for that type of attention sort of hurt. It felt like I wasn't doing enough, or giving enough. The next morning, though I don't have an Instagram, and am not on the app, I went to check his using the desktop version, and found that posts where he once called me the love of his life, or a specific post with a gift I gave him that once said, "Greatest gift from the greatest girl," were still on his profile, but the words, girlfriend, or love of my life, were completed erased. With this realization, my confusion and hurt turned to very real heartache. I called him and asked if he had deleted these words from the specific posts, and with shame, he said yes, he did. When I asked why, he said it was because he just didn't want the attention from the girl asking him about himself to be disrupted if she found out he was in a long-term relationship. I guess this is where I asked the obvious and questioned why someone who is just asking about your favorite books, movies, etc., would be driven away by the fact that you have a girlfriend. And he said he didn't know why he did it, and that it was a massive mistake. At the risk of seeming toxic, and I will take full accountability for seeming so or being so, I asked him to please deactivate his Instagram for the time being while we sort through this, his Twitter as well. He did, and though I was feeling a bit of relief about that, I couldn't help but feel a bit saddened that he didn't choose to do that on his own for the benefit of our relationship. He had to wait for me to ask, which again, just made me feel like such a toxic and controlling partner. 2 things I always strive to be so far from. When he got home from work, we discussed everything at massive length, and he continued to swear up and down that these conversations pertained strictly to music, movies, and books, and he didn't have interest in her. Just interest in the initial rush of the attention he was receiving. We read a few articles, and he broke things down to me as his self-esteem has never been lower. Despite his career as a doctor being at a high, and his finances in order, he felt things with his music weren't taking off. And with that came a feeling that he wasn't special, and it was nice for someone to make him feel that way. I felt shame and asked him if I wasn't doing enough or giving enough to him to make him feel that way. He said, I defiantly was. But my love, and attention and affection, became a pillar he could rely on, and got used to, so with new attention came a rush. And he liked that. I asked him if he wanted to be single, and find that rush in dating new people. And he kept insisting that that's so far from what he wants. He wants to remain a couple, and do all he can to work on these things together. Though I can't help but correlate that feeling he enjoys with the feeling of a first date. Which hurts, of course. I told him I didn't really see how we could move past this because there was nothing much for me to make an attempt to work on moving forward. This seems to be a self-stemming problem that I emphasize with, but just don't want to be on the receiving end of the counter effects. So though it is incredibly uneasy to begin to think of how difficult it'll be to begin again, it is just as difficult to think about how difficult it would be to stay and try to rebuild back up an issue that I feel like just a bystander. When it comes to, this has all been very painful, and if this comes to an end, I just want it to be as civil and as possible. He deserves to love himself, but not at the expense of the love we have between us. I deserve love that is stable and comforting, and not laced with newfound paranoia. Despite this all, my heart is still very much in this, of course, and he has been very vocal about how it was just one mistake. Nothing happened, we can work through this, etc. And I secretly keep hoping he will make a step, any step really, to showcase these words and implement action, seek a new therapist. Find the two of us a relationship counselor, buy a book on self-help or on how couple conquer affairs, anything at all. Without me having to be the one to ask him. I just want him to have that yearning that he continues to say he has, but instead of saying it, I was him to show me. That makes me irrational or just plain dumb. I believe to be in a state where I can handle either answer. Or something completely different just the same. Do all think I'm blowing something completely out of proportion? Given how this was an exchange of conversation between him and another girl for just a few days. And his erasure of me on his profile was only for about 2 days? This has been a first in this relationship, this has been a first in my life, truthfully. I just felt completely vulnerable and isolated. About a week after my post, I planted a wall of blackberries and raspberries at the 2 sides of my garden facing the driveway. About 30 centimeters from the edge, so no overhanging branches. On the other side of the berry wall, I planted lots stuff like strawberries and tomatoes. To reach the tomatoes and strawberries from the driveway, you have either go through the fruit bushes or walk up to my house. Walk about 2 m along the side of the house and my windows, and then walk into my actual garden. Not something you do by mistake. For about 2 weeks it was somewhat quiet, but I still found the kids on my driveway every single days. As far as I know, they did not enter the garden, and I hadn't noticed them walking around my house anymore. So I figured the bushes were working. About 1 week ago, berry season started and my bushes are now full of raspberries, and there's lots of strawberries as well. The neighbors noticed. First I caught the boys picking and eating raspberries, so I told them off and dropped them off at home, told their mom I caught them stealing. That's how I see it, even though it's fruit, and that I'd call the cops next time. She huffed and told me to grow up, but took the boys inside anyway. After that it was quiet up until yesterday afternoon, when I went out for a while and found the dad and his 2 sons right in the middle of my garden when I returned, clearing my bushes and plants. I didn't even confront them. Just called the cops from a distance as they hadn't noticed me yet, and started filming them after making the call. Luckily 2 cops showed up after 10 minutes or so, and they confronted the neighbor as they were still picking berries. They told them they were trespassing and that the berry picking was in fact considered stealing, and that I could press charges. For the first time I noticed a bit of fear in my neighbor. He was having trouble finding his words and kept looking back at his house. I guess hoping his wife would show to yell at the cops. They all went inside with the cops, so I just went home as well. After a while the cops came by and asked me if I wanted to press charges. I asked them if they felt like they scared the neighbor enough to stay away. I got a small smile and yes, about him, but the wife had just kept shouting at them and her husband about the little living next door. I told them no for now, asked them if I'd be allowed to get an extra camera set up on the wall between my garden and the road, to cover the entire front garden plus driveway, They said that's allowed as long as it's on my side of the wall. So, now I'm getting an extra camera installed. One neighbor knows I'm done messing around, but his wife isn't there yet, and if I ever catch any of them again, the cops will be called and possible charges will follow.